A lot going on this week. Chinese generals getting fired, underwater cables being destroyed, the mighty A-10 leaving its last overseas location, and a whole bunch more. Welcome to the Lowdown this week as we dive into everything that is going on around the globe: geopolitics, defense, and aviation, your one-stop source. So this week we're kicking it off with a bit of history, which is the mighty F-22. First debuted in combat, believe it or not, in 2014, and that was in support of Operation Inherent Resolve. Just so happened that I'd be flying around that time period in the same space, so it was good to have Big Brother up there in the bozosphere, able to rain down air dominance whenever needed. But the F-22 actually got into the air-to-ground arena during that time frame, fighting ISIS, dropping some precision-guided munitions. So check out the newsletter, which we also cover the thread of the day each and every week. This week, the Shahed 138 and 238 kamikaze drones. So you'll see those in and around various conflicts in the world, namely the Israel-Iran debacle that has been going on, and by debacle I mean conflict, as well as you'll see that over in Ukraine and Russia. But you can check out some of the stats and the backing of threats of the day, which again we cover in the newsletter there in a little bit more detail. So kicking it off, the mighty A-10, January 2025. They're going to start departing the Korean Peninsula, and they will be out by the end of September, which is the end of the fiscal year of 2025. This is the last overseas location for the A-10. Remember, the United States Air Force is finally divesting the A-10, making way for the next generation air dominance fighter, aka NGAD, more F-35s, etc. And I know there will be people fired up saying you can't replace the A-10. Yep, it's a close air support machine. We've talked about on this podcast, Flash has definitely dove into it in great detail. I think very succinctly, the capability gap, the knowledge that departs in the A-10 community, when that goes away, I don't think we have a good plan for retaining that and capturing that. And you should check out some of the episodes Flash has done recently talking about the A-10 and just all the knowledge that has been built in that community. Where is it going to go as the A-10 departs the fix? So right now there are 24 A-10s that are stationed at Osan Air Base, just outside of Seoul there in Korea. The plan is to back it with F-16s, F-35s, and F-15EXs as those come online. This is already kind of going on. Remember last year, the F-15C, which has been in Kadena in Japan for the last 4 decades or so, that rather abruptly departed the fix there in Kadena, and it has since been backed with theater security packages, establishing our dominance in the Pacific theater. So the plan now to depart the A-10s and backfill with other 4th and 5th generation fighters there. Let me know your thoughts. All right, we got an embassy guard in Oslo. U.S. embassy guard has been arrested, and he is accused of spying for both Russia and Iran, providing state secrets. Norwegian authorities came out saying that he was arrested and his activities involve selling or giving away state secrets. He denies being a spy, but has consented to the 2-week detention. I'd be interesting to hear what that consent and what that 2-week detention might look like. But a lot of spying going on, and we'll have more actually in next week, because turns out after I hit record, more things popped up with some spies in the U.S. So been a lot of that lately in the newsletter. They're out there. If you're a newsletter subscriber, yeah, check out the trivia there. What Air Force aircraft has been in continuous production for the last 70 years? Is it the B-52, the C-130, the F-16, or the almighty KC-135? A lot of mighties this week, but you know, here we are. All right, jumping over to China as we will navigate through these news stories here. So Chinese hackers are positioning themselves inside U.S. critical infrastructure, and this is according to Morgan Adminsky, who's the executive director of U.S. Cyber Command. Back in May, we had Joe Wise on the podcast. Traditionally, or by trade, he is an industrial control systems engineer, and we dive deep into this, and this is what his focus of his last 20, 30 years of his career has been, is industrial control systems and how vulnerable they are. And these are all the little widgets and valves and pressure sensors that are filled throughout our entire everyday lives that we don't even know, hundreds of thousands of them. And this came out this past week. So it is something I think is important to talk about, and we need to keep talking about it because there is a significant threat. And they're saying that China is doing this. They're getting inside of heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, things that, I mean, honestly are innocuous until they go wrong. And it's not super sexy. And I say that if we think like the colonial pipeline hacking, that caught a lot of attention, but not a lot of people are losing sleep if building X, Y, or Z has a vulnerability in one of their industrial control systems and let someone get in there to turn the heat up, turn it down, shut it off, etc. But this is inside HVAC, energy, water controls, and they've been doing this, positioning themselves in the event of a conflict. And you can just imagine what kind of disruption this might create inside the United States, inside any nation for that matter, if just these everyday systems stop working. It's not good. So these operations are designed to be disruptive. And we saw this recently with the election, and it was an operation dubbed Salt Typhoon. And this was Chinese hacking U.S. telecom firms, stealing sensitive call information and data. This is nothing new, but it's ongoing, and you can only expect it to escalate. All right, got two cool buds hanging out here in the newsletter. Russia, it is being thought, has traded the S-400 systems, missiles, and components for these 10,000 or so North Korean troops that they have sent to the front lines of Ukraine. This is the next level of escalation. So there is a South Korean security analyst who is alleging or suspecting that the S-400 has been sent to North Korea. This would be a huge advancement. The S-400 surface-to-air missile system would obviously increase the robustness of the North Korean air defenses, which is already robust and very complex and probably the most dense on the face of the earth. But this is taking it to the next level. The S-400 able to target, track, and engage multiple targets, being highly mobile, not saying that the North Koreans haven't already mobilized some of their immobile systems that are more or less legacy. They've been upgrading them, but you can expect that obviously this trade for 10,000 troops definitely came with something. And if it's the S-400, that's a pretty big deal, in my humble opinion. Last week, put out a video on the ATACMS strike and then the Russian response with the RS-26. That's up on YouTube. President Vladimir Putin has come out piling on to this attack, saying that the missile test of the RS-26 was very successful in their opinion, and they're going to continue to produce it. So again, backstory, ATACMS, U.S. ATACMS system. We authorized Ukraine to utilize it to strike inside Russia. Russia responded with utilizing the R-26, which is an intermediate range ballistic missile. Think ICBM, but shorter range, capable of carrying both nuclear and conventional warheads. It appears now, and despite the video that I put out, this would be the correction, a lot of the assessment was going around, and this is all open source, that the videos that were out there weren't real, or they were reversals of previous strikes because you don't see any impacts. Well, it looks like now that they actually utilize dummy warheads. So these were just inert, making impacts. Now this is a hypersonic, right? It's an intercontinental, inter-range ballistic missile capable, in theory, going upwards of Mach 10. So President Vladimir Putin has leaned in saying, hey, we're going to keep testing these things because, I guess in case you missed it there, this experimental strike was very successful. In a televised meeting with Russian leadership and defense ministry, Putin claimed that the missile could not be intercepted by air defenses and that Russia will begin a serial production of the new weapon. There are currently no means of countering such a missile, no means of intercepting it in the world. And I will emphasize once again, we will continue testing the latest system, Putin said. So he's leaning all in on the RS-26 and those systems. And this all stems from the ATACMS usage last week. So if you haven't seen that video, you can check that out. I'll link that down below or up top or wherever we might be going. This is a great time to talk about the sponsor of this video, which is Aura. I use them. It's a service I've been using for quite a while. When I started out, the piece I liked about them the most was the fact that they go out there and they scan the dark web. They scanned data brokerages, see who's using your information and selling your information. I had over 60 data brokerages that were selling my information. They immediately go to work to start removing you from those data brokerages and petitioning them to get your information off. You also get alerts as they go out there and scan the dark web if anything pops up. So you know that someone is out there, has your back while you're sleeping. Worst case scenario, they offer upwards of $5 million of identity theft protection insurance. In today's world, you can't be too certain. Recently, hundreds of millions of Americans had their information compromised in a data leak through the service that provides background checks for investigators, companies, etc. So you might be affected. I was actually affected by it and got the alert from Aura. You can try it for 14 days free. That's enough time for them to go out there, scan the web. They can show you what information is out there, and then you can make the decision if you think it is valuable. So check out Aura. I think it is a good investment in your time and money and peace of mind. All right, 2 more underwater fiber optic cables were severed last week, and now a Chinese vessel or vessels are being suspected of suspicious activity or interest activity that are operating in and around this region. So the Chinese vessel, it departed the Russian port city on Friday last week and appeared to pass over the area where the incident occurs. This is labeled of interest by the Swedish police, who are looking into the incident. There's also been an increase in dark ship activity since Western countries have imposed all these sanctions on Russia after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. A dark ship is one of these vessels that turns its signaling systems off and makes it really difficult to try and track as they try and do nefarious things or circumvent all these sanctions that have been placed out there. So it looks like this last one might have been a result of dragging some kind of device, maybe an anchor, something else, some other system. This hybrid warfare, I think we're just going to keep seeing it, ranging from what I talked about at the beginning with industrial control systems, cyber warfare, sabotaging civilian infrastructure, which impacts the populace, all of these things. All right, the OA-1 SkyWarden arrived in the newsletter a couple weeks back or a couple months back, and this is the air tractor crop duster that's been armed to the teeth. That's landed in Oklahoma City at the Air National Guard unit there. They're going to be the training base. This will be an Air Force Special Operations Command aircraft. The goal to provide light attack, close air support, uncontested environments. Right now, Oklahoma City flies the MC-12, and that will be fully retired by 2027. That's an intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance plane, which I have a couple hundred hours boring holes in the sky around. So the SkyWarden, a much different platform in the sense like you can go kinetic with it versus the MC-12. The plan is there, it'll add about 100 to 150 personnel. There's some back and forth between what the Air Force Special Operations Command wants, what the Air Force wants, and what Congress is going to give. I think the initial number was 75. Now it's down to 62 of these aircraft. So it'll be interesting to see how this one works itself into the platform and if it survives. Remember the A-29 Super Tucana, which was part of the plan of this light attack and training Afghans. The Air Force ultimately ended up buying a handful of those, like 3, which now reside out at Edwards Air Force Base. The Osprey, the V-22, flown by the Air Force, Marine Corps, and the Navy, I think the Navy flies them, has been plagued with issues with multiple fatal crashes over the last couple of years. Now there are lawmakers all from Massachusetts which are petitioning to have the fleet grounded. Remember, it went through a multi-month grounding back earlier this year following a fatal mishap. And so there are lawsuits out there against Boeing and Bell Helicopter, which are a part of this. But it sounds like out of these investigations, parts have been identified that have been critical and a result or a driving factor in the mishap. And the companies aren't even in business anymore. So fortunately, this one is a can of worms that I don't think is easy to solve. Russia has made a rare admission saying that a key air defense system, that's an S-400, the Kursk region, was hit by the Ukraine's U.S. supplied ATACMS. So this is coming again out of that attack last week. But it was an S-400 battalion that was struck there. They're saying that 3 of the 5 ATACMS missiles were shot down, but 2 reached the target, damaging a radar system and causing casualties. The U.S. and China have swapped prisoners. This is following months of meetings and negotiations, but 3 Americans, including a businessman who was detained in 2012 for drug charges, another one charged with espionage in 2016, were all freed. The U.S. gave back some Chinese prisoners as well as someone who was facing charges in China. The big thing out of this was the U.S. agreed to downgrade its travel warning on China. It had previously been very high, meaning you could be captured, detained for no reason, but now don't worry about it as much. We're all good. So rest assured, you're good with that. I feel like we got to have at least 2 spying articles per newsletter. It seems like a lot of that going on, but a former British soldier, Daniel Calife, I butchered his name, which I don't feel too bad about. He's been found guilty of spying in Great Britain. He was sharing sensitive military records with Iran, including names of special forces soldiers. Prosecutors revealed he contacted Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps via social media and shared classified documents, compromising UK national security. He was in prison and he actually escaped in 2023. He was recaptured about 3 days later. He's been convicted of breaching the Official Secret Act, labeled reckless and dangerous, and he faces sentencing early next year. Well, I mean, it's the way, you guys do over in Great Britain. If you throw them in jail for posting on social media, I'm sure if you use social media to contact the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to sell secrets, it's really going to be harsh. So we're all standing by to watch. So again, last week, big week for Ukraine, being authorized to utilize a bunch of Western weapons to strike inside Russia, the first time that really had happened. But a Ukrainian Storm Shadow missile, which provided by the UK, it appears it has injured a North Korean general and killed multiple officers, according to the Ukrainian and Financial Times. Be interesting to see if that's true or not. This is a precision-guided missile that's targeted and gives Ukraine a deep strike capability. Beijing is investigating another top general. We talked about this before. There's a lot going on as far as the leadership in China that has made its way out into the news in the last several months, being the rocket force leader being fired, the defense minister being fired, a whole host of others through this crackdown. But Admiral Mao Ho, and you know I butchered that one, and I know I butchered that one. I'm not very bright. So he was the political work department of China's Central Military Commission, and he's under investigation for corruption. He was a close ally of Xi Jinping, and he joins, again, the growing list of officers who are being targeted, including former defense ministers, Li Shangfu, which we highlighted. This is a heavy crackdown on the rocket force. So you either got guys who are going against Xi or falling outside of favor who are being removed. Maybe that's one theory. Other news that's popped out, there's so much corruption that, for instance, their rocket force, that they're being filled with, missiles are being filled with water instead of rocket fuel. That's all open source. Those are news articles. I leave it to you to go figure out what's true or not, but it does seem like there's a lot of turmoil that's going on in and around the PLA and their top leadership. All right, military bases in England have had unidentified drones flying over it. This is nothing new outside the fact that it's in the UK. Last December, Langley Air Force Base, Oceana, all had drones flying in formation, flying over. This seems to be more of a common occurrence. It's happening across Europe. The initial findings are saying, hey, this is coordinated efforts. This is not just some hobbyist who's flying a drone over. These are done with a purpose. So the British have deployed about 60 troops and investigators trying to figure out what's going on. But RAF Mildenhall, Feltwell, and Lakenheath all were impacted by this between November 20th. And in fact, I think we did highlight about a month ago with an article that Langley Air Force Base, home to the F-22, actually putting up drone nets to prevent such a thing from happening again or minimize the possibility. As we wrap up here, Turkey has submitted a formal request to reacquire 40 F-35. So this is citing signals coming from the Trump administration that if they give up their S-400, it sounds like they've already kind of worked out the details for, hey, we'll give the U.S. the S-400 system, move it to Incirlik Air Force Base, and that doesn't violate any agreements with Russia. I'm sure that's going to stir the pot. And then they'll get the F-35. This was like the last straw in the hat that removed them from the program. The fact that they said, hey, we're going to buy the S-400 system from Russia. Well, we're not going to let you have our F-35 and you have an S-400 because you can get information and test and do things out of that we don't want you to do. So they were removed from the program. Remember, Turkey flies the F-4, which is some cool videos of that recently going around, and the F-16 Block 30s. Out of this announcement, or in the same announcement, Turkey said, hey, we're not going to do the $23 billion upgrade to bring their F-16s up to the Block 70 level. Instead, they're going to do a revised version for their F-16s, modernize it with about a $7 billion package, and the majority of that is going to be done and handled in-house, in-country, not leaning on Lockheed or some other contractor to do these upgrades. Turkey's aerospace defense industry, they've rolled out their version, their prototype of their 5th generation fighter. They've already upgraded a lot of their F-16s with AESA radars. So they're going to upgrade their fleet and they're going to do it in-house, and maybe they get the F-35 back. Who knows? All right, that is the lowdown for this week. Make sure you grab the newsletter. You can click the link down below, get it absolutely free each and every week, and stay in touch with what's going on with the podcast. I'll see you next week.